Oh my gosh, I'm looking at my hair. It's really funny. But I wanted to jump on here because I'm working on some stuff this morning that's arising really quickly and to talk about where this is going. And it happens to be right in concert with this final reading for the first hub. And this is about nervous system regulation. And it's where this whole thing is going with Parinama. And the book in and of itself is is like a standalone thing. But what this is ultimately about is about the management of our nervous system and how everything is like how the underpinning of every aspect of our lives and the things that we wish to we aspire to and wish to achieve is impacted by the fact that at a subconscious level, our nervous system was programmed early in life and is operating us. And so as a result, it creates this sense of having kind of a passenger on board who may be driving us in a direction that is like against where we want to go. So that can even create dynamics within ourselves, which are like suspicious or even like self doubt or, just, a lot of times I see people who have goals and then when they're not achieving them, they are like really hard on themselves, and they're reenacting dynamics of folks who'd been hard on them before and taught them like this is how you achieve things is by being really disciplinarian with yourself. So, yeah, so even like some of like so the patterning, and so right now there's a lot of talk about the Michael J. Fox documentary, which is, which the quote here I've heard multiple times now is that optimism is sustainable with gratitude, and it's a really beautiful notion. But the caveat that I want to introduce to that is I think, I think the practice of being able to be regulated to the point where you can feel gratitude is a thing. And this is another thing. So it's so one way to put this is that, you think about the last conflict that you had with a spouse, with a friend, family member, coworker. Now think about were you w- were you hungry or were you like comfortably full? Were you tired or were you really well rested? Really well rested. Did you have time or was your schedule packed and you're double booked and you just had I mean, it was just like you're already like crammed. So it's like thinking about, okay, what are the conditions that lead to us, tending to be um, you know, like create conflict and have difficulty. And so, a lot of like what's arising right now, and I'm actually oddly not articulating that well, but that's okay. Um, that that the condition of our nervous system, and in the future I'm going to get more into this, really is going to dictate how we show up and what we're capable of in a moment. So if we're capable of holding space, capable of being patient, capable of being able to see another person's point of view, capable of being able to have some kind of context as far as understanding kind of like, oh, this is part of like my stuff too. It's all about, it's all related to the regulation of our nervous system. But if we don't, first of all, have ownership of that, one of the things that's like another incredible common scenario is that we see ourselves react that way. We see ourselves get aggravated. And but and the thing with having a conflict isn't just that you have a maybe it doesn't get expressed with them, but it's internalized. So maybe like your aggravation and there's an internal like monologue about this person. So it's kind of the thing where it's like, well, you create, if you don't create the war outside, like you create one within with like surfaced aggravation. So just that, like, just that. I mean, so anyway, so I'm gonna read a little bit because my hope is that I can finish the end of chapter 4, and we can move into um, the next chapter. So this is chapter 4, first hub. A little confusing, I get it, but I want to read through this because I'm really looking forward to moving into the second hub. And yeah, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready. Okay. So just actually, and one thing is the one that I did I just took a couple of minutes yesterday is talking about the accordion, which is if you feel tension, if you feel stiffness or tension, is squeezing into it, like actually like moving into it and then slowly releasing it. And that technique comes from Stanley Kellerman, who created a significant body of early somatic work. In fact, it's kind of weird, like all and somatic being like the body nervous system, we'll call it, for like the versus like the brain spinal cord notion of the nervous system. So all of it's kind of like a funny thing is that all of the early, or at least not all of them, like a lot of the early somatic pioneers, like Lowen, Kellerman, um, even like Wilhelm Reich to a certain extent, like all their stuff is like weird. Like Stanley Kellerman's books are just like super bizarre. And so it's not like really surprising to me that they never reached mainstream success. So it's like Alexander Lowen wrote a book, The Way to Vibrant Health, which is actually like a photographic illustrated book of like really, really like effective somatic practices. And what he developed is like astonishing, but it's super weird. Like the pictures, he's wearing like a little bikini. He's European. It's super weird, and so it's like it's interesting to be reading these things and using them and knowing how great they are and realizing it's like the accessibility to that book, just pictures alone. The Stanley Kellerman is like super weird because they're illustrations, and they're really skillful illustrations, but they're they're kind of like dystopian, honestly. Like it's kind of might give you a bad dream. But the thing is that these are people who very early did a lot of very early like deep work. And I mean deep as far as like spending entire careers examining the anatomy of the emotional body and the depth of what they like of the pattern, like the patterning that they were able to document is really extraordinary. And actually, when I was writing Parinama, that like it was really like a lot of making decisions about to what extent that those notions get brought in. And some of it is it's a little bit loaded as far as like there being some kind of notions of even the language that's used, and some kind of odd things about like cultural inclinations that are kind of dated as well. I mean, it's like it's older work, but but it is just funny. I mean, the Stanley Kellerman, he really deserves a shout out on this because it's a profound. I mean, it's funny because you also see like you'll see in like say like YouTube or whatever, it's like this isn't like revolutionary, the idea of like squeeze and release to relax. I did like when I to go to sleep last night, I listened to an ASMR and they did that. And I was like, yeah, that's like the whole thing. It's not so unusual, maybe the squeeze and release. So anyway, okay. I'm gonna read. So discharge. So on one end of the spectrum, folks with shrinking adaptations often struggle with fully taking up space and indulging needs. And so they benefit from activities that build charge, for example, eating and resting. On the other end, inflating holding patterns and adaptations tend to overdo rest and nurture to the point that they're no longer restorative, instead create lethargy and thus need discharge. And one note too on the overdoing of either side of these is that, so for example, the inflating holding pattern, overdoing rest and nurture, um, that overdoing is, and we'll get into this in the coming chapter, which is substitutes for the authentic. When we talk about pacifiers, substitutes for the meeting of the authentic need of nurture. Um, and so the reason that those like addiction will occur, like with like all sorts of things like drinking, like shopping, drugs, food, is because they can never really fully achieve the like sense that we're trying to yeah, we're trying to get. So anyway, just that's a kind of a side note on that. But either way, like be nice to yourself. That's it. Okay, there are many forms of everyday discharging, such as sweating, talking, and physical exertion. Other more intense discharging activities, such as laughing, sobbing while crying, and orgasming, rely on shaking that releases muscular tension. Charging, which is generally energizing, can lead to feelings of exhaustion and low energy when done to a body that has not been discharged. Here I focus on a specific muscular release for discharging stored muscular tension by using shaking and tremoring. It's an unusual sensation, a certain loss of control that takes some getting used to, especially in the chest cavity and diaphragm. So especially if the chest cavity and diaphragm are so rigid that they can no longer do subtle movements like the quivering and crying or the rollicking abdominal movements of a deep belly laugh. Yeah, I was this is like there's just so much in this. This is there are people that and just this weekend, I was in a group and folks were saying, like, "I don't cry." Very common that people say, "I don't cry," or "I only cried once as an adult, and it's when, a beloved parent died, and I sobbed, like, dramatically." The other things people that say, "I don't dream," and to a certain extent, people who don't really laugh, and so even with crying and laughing, where crying, when someone's crying and it's just tears, or when somebody's laughing and it's like, ha 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 ha, oh my gosh, ha ha ha, that's funny, versus like it's like like there's actual like heaving and sobbing. That's what crying is like, and so it's like the repression of like so now we're talking about like storing tension by blocking this stuff is holding it back. And so you talk about like holding back a physical inclination of responsiveness, and that everything else that carries with it is like laughing is one of those like that. And even laughing might be something, I think most people are familiar with having to like hold back laughter, and that like having like really like wild laughter at something, it's like when it's like, don't laugh, oh my gosh. So we kind of like get socialized to hold in all sorts of things. So part of what we're trying to figure out here and work on is being able to restore that ability to like really have the full physical experience of these things. And dreaming comes later in this, but all of these things are natural. And the thing is like we're doing them, and this is about how we like bring them into our experience as being like fully more robust and experienced. So anyhow, so some familiar places where tremor is experienced are in a good laugh, in holding a contraction during exercise, and in orgasming. In a world that favors civilized behavior, we're socialized to police our responses from a very early age. Natural reflexes are suppressed in favor of social belonging, and it's hard to draw a definitive line of where and when restraint shifts from being responsible to restricting our humanity. Excessive restraint, which is common, is how we can become adults who think we don't cry, don't dream, and aren't emotional. Yeah, okay. Repeating myself. It's a matter of how good you become at hiding and or suppressing your responses. A concealment that's eventually hidden even from ourselves, locking reactions into our bodies as rigidity, stiffness, exhaustion, and soreness. So even with this being said, it's like, you know, like I was around this past weekend, I was around people that are in their 80s who were, wiggling their hips and, laughing freely and, just like very present, like very like alert and present. And they were in the context of a very like large, loving family. And I think that was just really like rollicking and like a lot of expression and funny and laughing, and they spend a lot of time together. And that was and I think these are all things that are like very much related. And even that there's a lot of discussion about how our our connections are related to our longevity, and that's been something that's been coming up a lot lately in sort of like news stories or whatever. But in the context of having been around this large family where there's just a lot of joy and freedom and acceptance and openness and presence, and it's seeing how it's like their ability to physically actually really express themselves and be safe and like laugh and be seen and heard and pay attention to each other, that makes a lot of sense, like from a longevity standpoint. So a discharge involves a slight electrical shaking, which can feel like a live wire and is perplexing in that it's a little out of control. But these brief, often awkward moments offer a significant reward, ultimately restoring natural responsiveness into your body by increasing blood flow to stressed, rigid muscles, which leads to laughing more easily, restoring movement and coordination, physical satisfaction, and even ease in speaking with greater confidence. Yeah. Yeah, and you know what? I'll tell you that folks who do this, and this is now that more and more people are doing parinama, is something that's coming up, is that people find it actually when they have like when they're discharging the muscular tension, um, that there'll be a subsequent release of either crying or vocalizing. Crying's pretty common, vocalizing's pretty common. That'll just be like a kind of barfing of like kind of a feeling of grief. Almost everyone that I can recall has told me that well, it might seem scary for an onlooker. For them, it's like is the feeling of a release, but that it's perplexing. It's that there's such a strong, like that there's just such a strong release. And people like, folks who've done yoga, like it's pretty common that people have had an experience of like in a hip opener or some type of release of tension creating an emotional surge. Like it's actually not like so far outside the consciousness in the public. I mean, it's a little, it's like in the yoga world or people who've done yoga. But, it was the first question I ever asked that actually that led to this process was on social media. I had asked a question which was along the lines of, have you ever had the experience of having a physical, um, like doing something physical, like like a stretch or whatever, that led to an emotional release? It's funny. I hadn't thought of that until this very second. And that was that question arose while I was doing my yoga practice in Cashers, was it like North Carolina? And it just immediately came to mind. It's like, oh, that's a question, and yeah, it's interesting. Some of the things that came out of that set the ball rolling for why we're here right now. So hooray! Okay, so here for these last things, there's the discharge, and then there's the charge here as well. I want to show the action potential here, which was referenced in like the earlier of the like the earlier reading. Now here what I want to show, and this is going to be hard to see. If you have the book, this is page 81. But what we're talking about here is that, so this is sort of at a resting state, and this is where a stimulation occurs. So can be like a stress event or whatever. And what happens is like the building of the tension eventually achieves the action potential, which creates action. So what we're talking about is cutting off, like, so you're getting the flood of the biochemical, like, so whether it's adrenaline, we'll use adrenaline in this example. So you're getting the stimulation, the adrenaline is building, and here when you hit this, it's very oversimplified, but just kind of like bear with me. Then you create action, and then you begin to repolarize, and then you enter absolute refraction, which is the kind of like refreshing kind of return repolarization, or not repolarization, return to threshold. So what we're talking about is like having a stimulation and then cutting off the response before it can actually be expressed, and how these cut off responses can stay stored in our body unless we actively enter into a practice of releasing them. So I'm not going to do this exercise right now for this, just for a couple of reasons, but I'm going to read through it. So it's the squat and strap around the foot for lying down. So if this is something you want to do, you can follow along. So, all right. So starting with your bare feet on the ground, step into a sumo stance with your feet pointed slightly outwards, and do the grounded squat with K1. Relax your lower back, engage your lower abdomen, keep your knees back so you can see your toes, and squat down with your legs from anywhere between 180 and 90 degrees. Find a position in which you can withstand the quivering for up to 5 full breaths. Stand, then repeat up to 3 times. This can also be done lying on your back with a strap held with one end in each hand, looping around the bottom of your foot. For this exercise, we do 1 foot at a time, alternating from left to right. The foot in the strap is elevated with the knee at about 90 degree angle. The other leg remains on the ground. Use the pressure of your foot against the strap to access the tremor. This can take some exploring. You're looking for a tremor that's practically effortless. Hold for up to 5 breaths and switch legs. Repeat up to 3 times. Next, release the strap, and while still lying down with the bottoms of your feet flush to the ground and knees bent so they point upwards, slightly slap or even stomp the bottoms of your feet on the floor to feel an additional release. Then relax your legs out like a gingerbread figure, maybe adding the gentle action of your hands slapping the ground, even adding a playful no, no, no with each stomp slap can offer an outlet for a little contained adult tantrum. So cute. Holding in charge is exhausting for a body, so discharging is essential for readying your body for restoration. In addition, chronic muscular holding of rigidity, stiffness, and inflexibility takes a low-grade, ongoing energetic demand to maintain. Stored charge in your muscles blocks full relaxation. As a result, you may initially become tired when you discharge, but ultimately over time, you free up more energy and feel more energized. So this is another thing. Yeah, I mean, this is such a core thing here. Is that the held muscular tension is actually like kind of a vortex that's pulling energy, because it is a muscular contraction. So it's like a low grade, sustained, like absorption of energy. And so this is worth mentioning, that folks who are in the Parinamaverse right now practicing this are talking about how all of the sudden they have access to things that are absolutely astonishing to them, which is, all of a sudden writing, all of a sudden having better ideas, all of a sudden feeling smarter, all of a sudden picking up an instrument that they haven't played in a while and feeling that there's just like more energy for things. And I will say, from a first hub standpoint, like, because we're in the first hub, one of the things is this can feel, um like the thing is, there can be a thing about all of a sudden having this openness and having actual habits that are very like sort of first hub-ish, um wanting, being like used to sitting and watching TV for long periods of time. Just, like, I won't get into all of them. And so there is a bit of a process of being able to like become comfortable with having more energy, just because it's the comfort in terms of the familiarity of having patterns. And so, so one of the things to encourage in that is that, it's looking at things like, maybe you cook more. Like, so maybe it's like, oh, maybe now I have the energy to like make more interesting meals and like try some new stuff and do some research and shop for some different ingredients. Maybe now I have time to like walk in nature. So it's to take some of this energy that's open and, potentially introduce some like first hub restorative practices in there, because that's actually a thing that happens, which is people not knowing exactly what to do with the new, like kind of very like clean, like sort of like, it's not manic. It's just this kind of very level energy that's being accessed. And so it's kind of like, it's like, what do I do with this extra hour I have in my day? Which is also not an uncommon way to look at this. It's like, it just opens up time, because you have folks who are like, I'm busy, and because they're managing some, like first hub stuff, like their schedules are packed, but it involves like watching a lot of like, say, TV or whatever. And so it's like, if that like goes down even just by an hour, that's like more time. And that can be, kind of stabilizing for some people, believe it or not. Facts. Okay, charge. The charging in the upcoming hubs more closely resembles the type of active stimulation one would expect during the initiation of the action potential, the picture we just looked at. But in the first hub, we look to the restoration period after stimulation, the absolute refraction. Within the cycle of activation and discharge, oh, that's really badly read. Okay, I'm going to reread if you'll stay with me. But in the first hub, we look to the restoration period after stimulation, the absolute refraction, within the cycle of activation and discharge. Thus, in the first hub, charging is both gently stimulating and restorative. And although I discussed charging by introducing consciousness to deep rest, in this hub, we also charge through subtle and soothing stimulation. So energizing the bottoms of the feet. It's a really big one. So this can be done standing, seated, or lying down using a tennis ball, physio ball, or a yoga strap. So standing, unlock your knees and notice any sensations in the bottoms of your feet. If you're using a ball, it works best on a soft surface like a carpet or a yoga mat so the ball doesn't roll away. Start with your left foot planted on the ground with the ball under your right foot. Roll the ball around the parameter of your foot, keeping a slight bend in your standing knee. Next, allow the sensation to guide where you roll the ball. Do each foot for 5 breaths each and repeat up to 3 times. Yeah. So, and also energizing the bottoms of the feet. This can also include standing barefoot on the ground, like on natural surfaces like grass, stone. Yeah. This like, and I think one of the things that's like absolutely astonishing about this is that it takes as little as 5 minutes to experience a shift through it. And it's one of those things where it's like, oh my God. I mean, at this point, there's plenty of research, but it's just really, I mean, I don't know, being socialized and raised in this culture, it's still one of those things that's like, oh my God, this is like happening. Okay, seated. Make sure your chair is sturdy and firmly planted, and firmly plant your left foot on the ground, placing your right ankle over the left knee or thigh. Give yourself a foot massage. It's remarkable how sensitive the bottoms of your feet can be. Switch feet when your foot is no longer feeling stimulated by the touch. If this places strain on your joints, place a ball on the ground and do the standing exercise with a ball from a seated position and lying down. Start on your back on a yoga mat, couch, or bed. Slide your feet up and plant the soles on the ground by bending your knees and pointing them towards the ceiling. Form a loop using a strap, scarf, or even a piece of soft rope, holding each end in a hand, and slip it under the bottom of your right foot. Next, extend the foot into the air, supported by the strap. Rub the bottom of your foot with a back and forth polishing motion. Do this for 5 breaths and switch to your left foot. All right. These containment practices will become a refuge for all the following hubs, along with the grounding practices that bring conscious reclamation into the body. The sense of trust and solidity in the first hub establishes the foundation and container for the fluidity, movement, and change that comes in Chapter 5, the second hub, feel. Ta-da! We did it! We're here. We made it to the second hub. Congratulations. It's very exciting. That was really great. I feel very happy about that. Yeah. Yeah, it's a really this is a really interesting experience reading it, because it also my relationship with this content is, the primary difference comes from how much time I spent with it. I mean, for obvious reasons, but also understanding that the way a person reads this is going to be piece by piece. And as a result of how it gets sort of downloaded and integrated would really benefits from some consolidated practices, which is what I'm working on right now. And so anyway, I want to say thank you. Any comments? I love it, means the world to me. Any suggestions? So welcome. Please please subscribe. It really encourages me. And yeah, and I really look forward to continuing this. Like the reading the chapters, it's like I can already see where, in the stuff that I'm doing, that this actually it's very helpful to be reading the book. And this is a good format for actually being able to talk about it and capture some of the stuff. But the other stuff I'm working on already is starting to evolve in a really interesting direction. I'm looking forward to sharing it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing it. So anyway, thank you so much. I can't wait for next time. I'll see you soon. Love you. Bye.